the Cerebellum Show. We've got a phenomenal episode for you today. We're going to talk about one of the most shocking psychological experiments to occur in the 20th century. It's got intrigue, it's got mystery, and best of all, it's got controversy. We're talking about the Stanford prison experiment. In 1971, an ad requesting male college students to take part in an experiment showed up as if out of nowhere. The job would last around 2 weeks, but it paid $15. Out of 75 interested parties, 24 young men were interviewed and selected by Philip Zimbardo and his team to participate. The experiment? To live in a simulated prison in the basement of Stanford University. The students were randomly assigned to be a guard or a prisoner. The rules were simple. Guards must do whatever was deemed necessary to maintain the law, keep prisoners in check, and wipe out any violence. On August 17th that year, prisoners were arrested at their own homes without knowing beforehand and treated like actual criminals. The boys were stripped naked, their belongings were taken away, and they were forced to wear prison clothes, ball and chain included. They were never referred to by name. Instead, they were identified by an ID number. The basement had cells with barred doors and windows. There was even solitary confinement. The guards were given identical uniforms, a whistle, and an actual billy club. Zimbardo himself acted as the prison warden while he observed the students. Shockingly, a study that was supposed to last a couple of weeks had to be shut down after 6 days. In just the first few hours, the guards were already harassing and tormenting the prisoners. Guards were brutal and sadistic. The prisoners quickly fell into a hopeless submission. Prisoners were forced to perform menial and boring physical punishment. Those that disobeyed were beaten, tormented, and even locked into the psychologically damaging solitary confinement. Prisoners became severely dependent on the guards, and the guards, in turn, became more derisive. Cellmates would lie about each other in hopes that the guards would favor them. On just the second day, the prisoners rebelled, resulting in the guards torturing them physically, psychologically, and emotionally. Over the course of the study, some prisoners had to be released due to signs of severe depression that included uncontrollable crying, screaming, and fury. What had happened at the Stanford prison? Why did these young men, deemed to be healthy and normal by Zimbardo himself before the study, behave this way? How had this attempt to explain human behavior turned into one of the most notorious psychological experiments in history? Well, we are going to answer all of those questions for you on today's show. I have an amazing lineup for you today. First, Christina Maslick was a PhD student at the time of the experiment. What will she have to say about what she discovered in the basement of this university? And we have the man himself, Dr. Philip Zimbardo. What will he tell us about how this experiment got so ugly? And there might be a few surprises along the way. Thank you very much, and stay tuned after these short messages.
This message brought to you by Milgram's Electric Company. Always remember, folks, we don't stop providing, no matter what.
And we're back, and we have a great surprise for you, ladies and gentlemen. I can't believe we got him, but we did. This is Caden Jacobs. He was an actual guard at the Stanford prison experiment. It is such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm glad to be here and talk about my experience and answer any of the questions that you guys may have.
Oh, yes, I'm sure everyone here has a multitude of questions, and I know I have them. So to start, I gotta know, what was it the first day of the experiment? What was going through your mind? Did you expect it to turn into this crazy event?
Honestly, I had no idea that anything that happened was going to happen. I mean, we were trained a little bit on how to be guards. We were given our uniforms and everything, and it was an 8-hour shift. We went into their rooms. I mean, we stripped them naked. We pulled them out of their rooms. I mean, yeah, it was definitely a physical confrontation.
What other psychological tactics did you use on these prisoners?
We were basically like in an authority kind of uniform. We had sunglasses, so we kind of looked like they couldn't really tell our emotion or anything like that. They couldn't really read us. They didn't know what we were gonna do next, stuff like that. So, I mean that kind of gave us a little bit of more power to kind of do what we wanted to them.
Wow, I'm just amazed. You seem like a nice guy talking, thank you again for coming. I mean, I've heard of worse guards. I've heard, I think Dave Eshelman is his name. He must have been the most brutal, the most manipulative, and when questioned on it, he said, quote, he wanted to give the researchers something that they could use. I'm so glad that you were here and you came to tell us the story. But before we go, what had you learned? Like the most important thing that you take away from this experience?
Student, I've never really done anything like that before, and when you step back and look at everything that happened, we did exactly what people may have expected, kind of being in an authority position. We kind of we're abused a little bit like that, or a lot in that case. And then the prisoners, obviously with the rebellion, it was just weird because none of us, you wouldn't have thought that any of us would have really done something like that.
Wow, that is absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for your time. So happy that you got to be here with us today.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
This message is brought to you by Pavlov's Organic Shampoo. Remember, if there's one thing I know, it's classical conditioning.
So give a big round of applause for our next guest, all the way from UC Berkeley, social psychologist Christina Maslick.
Woo! Yeah! That's right, Christina. That's my girl. Hi, how are you?
Hi, how
Thanks
are
for
you?
having me.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for coming. Could you maybe go into detail into the role that you played in this experiment?
Well, you see, it's a pretty crazy story because I never truly intended on being such a big part of the experiment, but as you know, how life goes, things happen in crazy ways. So at the time, I had just begun to see Phil, and he had asked me to help him with the experiment by doing some interviews, so of course I said yes. I had known that over the last few days, the experiment really began to feel like a real prison, but it was not evident to me at the time how caught up people were into this experiment.
So what did you see when you went down into the basement to this prison? Were you caught off guard?
I mean, yeah, it was crazy until I went down to the basement. I thought Phil was the same guy, but I got down there and him and everyone else there was so different. I just remember thinking, oh my God, what happened here? I saw prisoners being marched to the bathroom with paper bags in their heads and being harassed by the guards, who some of them I knew, and I was just completely sick to my stomach thinking, I can't watch this. And the thing was, no one else thought to have this problem that I did, so I literally thought I was going crazy.
So is it true that you guys argued about what happened after the experiment?
Oh yeah, arguing is an understatement. I have never argued with him quite like that and since then, but yes, I told him how I was feeling and he argued back about my feelings.
So what happened after all of the arguing?
Well, finally he realized I was right, because duh, women are always right. But anyways, he came to the conclusion that he had changed and he was changing other people and it wasn't right. And basically now we're married and have 2 kids, so it was the best fight ever.
So how is it, do you think, that everyday guys who were deliberately selected for being, normal, so quickly succumb to the abusive conditions of a prison?
Part of what happened, I think, is that it evolved over time. Every day a little bit more happened to make it more prison-like, and people took on their roles as prisoners and guards with greater gusto. It was only if you came in as fresh as I did and towards the end that you could see the situation more clearly.
Well, folks, you heard it here first from Christina Maslick. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
So to celebrate, and this is really exciting, everyone is going home with a copy of the Stanford Prison Experiment on Blu-ray. Woo! And right after the break, you'll see it here first, folks. The man, the legend, Zimbardo himself. Stay tuned.
Woo! Yes, Zimbardo!
Yeah.
And this is sponsored to you by Dr. J's Private Practice. And remember, folks, psychologists like to do it on couches.
And here he is, Dr. Philip Zimbardo.
Yeah! Yes, Dr. Zimbardo!
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, it's wonderful to be able to discuss this controversial topic and really just share some more ideas on the matter.
Again, thank you so much for coming. I'm so excited that you are as involved as I am.
Oh, yes.
So I'm just going to start right off the bat. Why do you think these behaviors coalesce? How can you begin to explain why these boys and yourself acted the way they did?
You know, it would definitely be a result of the Lucifer effect. And basically, to kind of put it in layman's terms, it's this notion that God paradoxically created Lucifer, the angel of light, while also creating hell simultaneously. And so it's the fact that there's this innate thing, for lack of a better word, within us that can cause good people to be evil and evil people to become good.
Let me stop you right there. Can you please explain for our viewers at home, what do you mean by evil?
Evil, it's defined as an exercise of power. It involves intentionally harming someone else, and that harm is psychological, it can be physical, you know, it just morally destroys and just is a crime against humanity. I guess I could go as far as to say that. So, you know, social psychologists like myself, we attribute evil to a person or a situation. So, in terms of, you know, my prison study, evil existed in that basement. No one really anticipated it to take on such a powerful role, but, you know, it just happened.
This evil occurred to these boys that you yourself tested to be normal. So I'm going to bring this up. There was a study very recently that was conducted where the researchers wanted to understand whether or not these boys that you recruited were actually normal. So they recreated your advertisement.
Oh, wow.
They tested for aggressive and antisocial behaviors, and they found that each person had those behaviors, had those tendencies. You know, maybe the boys that you recruited weren't that normal, that they had intrinsic, innate, and maybe even buried antisocial tendencies that came out during this experiment, because the concept about prison life seemed so attractive to them. What do you believe is the bigger picture of your prison study? What did you find, and what applications do you have?
Well, so in response to your question, I think the biggest takeaway from my study is just kind of how power and how evil can really influence people. You know, when I went into that prison, I had the intention of studying the power of institutions, and I wanted to see how that influenced individual behavior. But man, after leaving that prison, I realized that something had to change. So by this, I mean that I needed to get the message out about the Lucifer effect. I needed to empower people to overcome their situations. And you know, I'm as guilty as anyone else. When I was in that prison, I had no idea just how bad I was. I had no idea how I was out of control, because I was transformed from this caring, objective researcher into this prison superintendent, this austere, nasty guy that just was so absorbed that I had no idea. It took my girlfriend at the time to be able to convince me otherwise. So I really thank my future wife for opening my eyes to the evil that was going on around me. And so I shut it down, and now I really have vowed to use this knowledge about the Lucifer effect, about, you know, the evil that exists within institutions, and I want to use it for good.
And how would you say you've done that?
Well, Sarah, first and foremost, I outlined several social processes that kind of grease the slippery slope of evil, if you will. So this way, I wanted to make sure that people were aware of these characteristics of evil. They were able to learn more about evil, and they were able to discover methods of overcoming them. So, you know, in case anyone was wondering, these processes, they include mindlessly taking the first small step. So, you know, that was definitely exemplified in the prison. Dehumanizing others, you know, that occurred very dramatically, which again, I am not proud of. But, you know, you also de-individualize yourself. You know, that's also very common. Diffusing personal responsibility, blindly obeying authority, uncritically conforming to group norms, you know, all these things exist, and it's so scary how those happen so quickly. So all of those things combined with passively tolerating evil through inaction or indifference, you know, all of those things really do contribute to what makes a person evil, you know, how power can corrupt someone. So I really just wanted to take this time to outline all those things for you and help your audience, you know, be aware of this. And even though the study was done, you know, many, many years ago, we can still learn from it today. It's still a very crucial study, thanks to its controversy.
That sounds absolutely perfect to me. Thank you so much, Dr. Zimbardo, for your wisdom and your eloquence today on this show.
Wow, well, thank you so much for having me. It was truly a pleasure.
It was an honor for us. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in, and I will see you next week.